Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the astrology of July 2021. So, there are a number of very powerful transits this month. Most of them I have already covered through my series that I concluded yesterday on the T square between Mars, Saturn, and Uranus. So, that's going to take up a good portion of the first week of the month. And really, those are probably the most powerful transits of July. So the first thing I have to say today is if you haven't watched that three-part series that I just did on the Saturn Mars Uranus dynamic, make sure you watch that because in some ways that should probably shape and tone the entire month of July for all of us. But there's other transits too that we need to make sure that we touch on. So I'm going to pull up the real-time clock and walk you through what I see as the biggest, most important transits of July. All right, so let's begin with the obvious. At the very beginning of July, you're going to see Mars on the 1st of July opposing Saturn. So our month starts off with the Mars-Saturn opposition. Now, just generally speaking, kind of a general summary of that transit, you're going to see, for example, questions, the battle of wills, discipline, rigor. You're going to look at, kind of, are you white knuckling things too much? Are you persevering or working through a high pressure situation? Are you dealing with questions of authority and ego? Are you trying to bend other people to your will? Like how is Mars Saturn showing up in your life? Hopefully it's constructive. I find that Mars Saturn is a great transit for persevering and working through limitations in constructive ways, but it can also be a sure sign that you're going to, push too hard, get too rigid about things, too principled, get into battle of wills, things like that. So just be careful of that. Now, if we move forward just a couple of days, on July 3rd, we're going to see Mars go through the square to Uranus between the 3rd and the 4th. Now, one thing that, again, I've talked about this in this three-part series, so check it out because I did a whole long video on Mars Uranus, really. But one thing about this transit is that breakthroughs are possible where there have been limitations or constraints with Mars opposite Saturn. Suddenly, there's this feeling of kind of breakthrough and liberation. And that can be a fantastic experience. It can be an experience that's very invigorating. Mars, the god of war, with Uranus, the god of electric revolution. So it can be a very invigorating, action-oriented transit. On the other hand, similar sudden acts of destruction or violence, a kind of violent release of macho energy or something like that. Also, just saying it's my way or the highway, or kind of insisting that something be done right now and pushing through impatiently. But again, also a transit that can lead to breakthroughs of all kinds. So that transit comes between the 1st and the 3rd. Now, again, I'm saying that's probably your biggest transit of the month, honestly. Now it happens right away, but then there's another transit a couple of days later on the 6th. We're going to see Mercury one last time squaring Neptune. We saw that a bunch in the month of June. I was prepping for it in May, and we were talking about it into June. Mercury went retrograde through the sign of Gemini, is going to come back through one last square to Neptune. Now, this can be one of the most romantic, fluid transits, singer-songwriters, poets, smooth, eloquent, beautiful speech. So the combination of Mercury and Neptune when it comes to the fluidity of mind, altered states of consciousness. It can be a very mystical and magical transit, where also non-ordinary experiences and insights are just kind of there. They just kind of flow through suddenly. Also, deception, unclear communication, dealing with technology issues, watch for weird idiosyncrasies, unconscious slips of the tongue, this kind of thing. Mercury's square with Neptune can also relate to, gossip or almost like disinformation or warped perceptions, unclear thinking. So to be a little bit careful of the Neptunian effect on Mercury. But the effect can be very positive as well, as I just outlined. So All right, let's go forward from here to the another thing that's happening on the 6th and into the 7th. Venus is also going to be opposite Saturn. And then by, let's see, by the 8th, it will square Uranus. So Venus is going to go through the exact same dynamic that Mars just went through. Now, Venus Saturn as an opposition can mean that there are with Uranus in the mix can suggest very serious crossroads in love, in relationships, around or around friendships and things like that. On the other hand, you can see deepening of commitments, getting real, getting serious, maturing in relationships, and having breakthroughs in relationships. You can also sometimes see that Venus Uranus is going to be a very electric sort of, what do I want to say, an awakening of the erotic nature of relationships. Like if your love life is a little stagnant, Venus Uranus will wake it up. Venus opposite Saturn will be about serious blockages in relationships followed by significant breakthroughs. So I like the gauntlet that Venus is going to run with Saturn and Uranus in terms of looking at things very seriously and then freeing yourselves from things that don't work, or moving through limitations or blockages in relationships, or anything Venusian, which could include health or the body or an aesthetic or a creative project. So that passage from Venus between let's see, the 6th and the 8th of July is pretty action packed. Now, isn't it interesting that the first 8 days or so of July includes so much between Saturn and Uranus? So it's, the first week of July is just super powerful in that regard. Now, if we move forward just a little bit more, we go to the 13th. On the 13th, we're rewarded for all of the hard work we've done because Venus and Mars will conjoin in the sign of Leo. And that conjunction in the sign of Leo really is a marriage of things that have maybe been trying to work towards synthesis for a while. Why do I say that? Because Venus and Mars both back to back go through the opposition to Saturn and the square to Uranus at the beginning of the month. Then they come together by the 13th, and you get that. I mean, in terms of like harmonizing things that have been wounded or broken, this transit's really good at mending broken things. Venus, Mars coming together. Venus, the harmonizer, Mars, the separator. Let's fix something. Let's take something apart or put it back together because it's been taken apart for the sake of greater harmony. So Venus, Mars coming together is also good for romantic relationships. It's kind of more of a romantic transit. It's very happy. It has the feeling like when these two planets come together, there's often a way in which the opposites of all kinds just seem to get along a little bit better. So tensions, dualities, those hard spots, you might just find them harmonizing nicely by the middle of the month. I think this is probably subjectively like the most positive looking transit of the month of July. Okay, so if we go forward from there, the Sun opposite Pluto is a very dynamic transit that will come. Let's see here. It's going to be on the 17th, just a day after my own birthday. I'm on the 16th. So anyway, now Sun opposite Pluto, really great for moments of kind of releasing major potential. A moment where there's kind of an upswell or an upsurge of pent up sort of subterranean energy that comes pouring out, and it can come through insights. The sun often represents clarity and wisdom, seeing something clearly. So kind of something bubbling up from the underground and suddenly you see clearly. It can also be an indication of, death and rebirth scenarios around your sense of life purpose or life direction, or major turning points that are happening somewhere. For example, if someone was going to break ground on a building project, Sun opposite Pluto, that sense of something, that an action that's launching, but that requires some kind of subterranean, breaking of ground, going deep within and turning over the soil and things like that. Death and rebirth around father figures or leaders, empowerment, themes of empowerment and disempowerment. We're going to talk about that as the transit comes around in the middle of the month, but watch for that around July 17th. Then we go to the 21st. Now, on the 21st, Venus is going to enter its fall, and that means moving into the sign of Virgo. So it just means that for a while, I'll just fast forward it so you can see. So you're taking Venus all the way. Here it goes, switches into Libra around August 16th, 15th, 16th, right around there. So when we think about Venus in the sign of Virgo for that long, we're typically thinking about a time where Venusian things become more mercurial. And that's not always easy because you're sort of taking the rational mental qualities and you're trying to pair them with the aesthetic sensual qualities. And sometimes the mental and the sensual conflict. So you could see some conflict between sort of mental, rational, and sensual between late July and about mid-August. It just tough time for Venus things overall, like just a more challenging time for Venusian, Venusian stories in our lives, whether that's relationships or our love life, something creative, something aesthetic, something involving our bodies and their appearance, whether it's our wardrobe or whatever new products that people are buying or something like that. So I'm always careful, like when Venus is debilitated, like be careful of the tattoos that you get, or, just kind of like what you're doing to beautify something. Just be careful that you're not overthinking it with Venus and Virgo. It can also be a sign of things that are going to become very technical and artistic. People who are like master craftsmen, but they're very technical in their craft. So, technical forms of art or things like that. So we'll visit Venus in Virgo when it comes around as well, and just give you a sense of what to prepare for. That's about the 21st. Now, on the 22nd, Sun will shift over into Leo. So you'll get the Sun in its most powerful sign of the year. In terms of the dignity of the Sun, you could make a case for Aries as well as its exaltation, but the Sun in Leo is pretty steady. And oftentimes, I think you'll find that your sense of dignity, purpose, sense of calling, you're revisiting those kinds of things. Like, why am I here? What makes me unique? What am I called to do? And maybe some review of that kind of those kinds of questions when the Sun enters Leo around the 22nd. Now, on the 28th of the month, Jupiter is going to back into Aquarius. We have a little visitation of Jupiter in Pisces from about mid-May through the end of July. It backs into Aquarius, and we get a reprise of Jupiter in the sign of the water pourer, in the fixed air sign of Aquarius. So we'll also make sure we revisit Jupiter through all of the houses later in the month and tell you what that's going to look like. Jupiter back into Aquarius will mean that Jupiter becomes a little bit more Saturn-like again. Not exactly its happiest place. So we may feel that shift somewhat in the negative at first, but in time we'll get used to it and back into what Saturn wants us to be doing and how we're expanding according to Saturn's plan, you might say. So watch for that kind of energy shifting back in towards the end of July. It's kind of like, I find that you often realize exactly what a planet is all about, either when it ingresses into a new sign or if it's going to temporarily regress through retrograde out of that sign. Suddenly you'll go, oh yeah, okay, because the back and forth really helps you differentiate between two signs. So I find that that's a really good time for students of astrology to get to know the difference between a Jupiter in Pisces and Jupiter in Aquarius. And I'm going to be talking about that in a video later in July. All right. So finally, on July 22nd, my last major transit of the month is, I skipped over it on accident. It's July 22nd. Sorry. On July 22nd, prior to Jupiter retrograding into Aquarius, Venus will oppose Jupiter. And the Venus-Jupiter oppositions, I find, can be very opulent. Like you have to be careful not to go spend a bunch of money or do things that are too extravagant, or kind of lose yourself in something that's sort of superficial. That those tend to be like the very basic shadows, but also this idea of opulence and growth and beauty and building or making something that's really beautiful. It's meant to like last and look nice. So, for example, Venus in Virgo's, I think, a wonderful planetary placement for landscape design or what am I calling it? Landscaping. So because it's an earth sign, Venus in an earth sign, and you're putting it along with Jupiter. So you think about like big yard projects or something like that. Lots of things though where the beauty and design of something can increase or expand or become more technical or something like that, or more efficient. And then also just like windfalls or good luck or good, like meeting the right people or having good association, things like that. So at any rate, those are, as I see it, the major transits of the month. And yeah, I look forward to breaking all of these down with you guys, transit by transit as the month goes on. Either tomorrow or Thursday, I'll be doing a live stream of the horoscopes for the month for your rising sign. I recommend if you subscribe to my channel and click the notifications icon, then you'll get a notification when I go live. And usually I go live probably around 10:30 or 11 a.m., probably about 10:30, 11 a.m., something like that, Central Time. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. We'll be breaking down the horoscopes this week for July as well. And lots of other good stuff to come shortly once we get into July too, starting to unpack lots of these transits a bit more. As always, I love to hear your stories, love to hear what you're looking forward to, what you're a little bit more maybe freaked out about. I always love to hear where people are at with the upcoming transits. So feel free to leave your comments and stories in the chat box, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.